You're listening to Dodge Movie Podcast. Your hosts are Christy and Mike Dodge, the founders of Dodge Media Productions. We produce films and podcasts, so this is a podcast about films. Join them as they share their passion for filmmaking.
Looking to start a podcast but don't know where to begin? Look no further. The team at Dodge Media Productions has 20 years of experience as podcast listeners and observing the industry and 8 years experience in podcast production. We can help you take your podcast from idea to fruition, and we'll make the process seamless and easy. We'll help you with everything from recording and editing to hitting the charts on Apple Podcasts. So what are you waiting for? Contact us today and let's get started. DodgeMediaProductions.com.
Welcome back to the podcast. We are going to talk about a movie that we tried to see, but it was harder than it should have been.
I am so confused, and I guess not enough to do a deep dive on the internet because I have other things I want to do, but I would love for someone to explain to me that this movie, we saw trailers for let's see, trying not to, no hyperbole, 3-4 months at least before, and it had a December 19th release date. Because of the stars Will Arnett, knowing it was directed by Bradley Cooper, I was super excited to see it. So we were looking, December 19th, that weekend we were gonna go see it, and it wasn't anywhere other than Vancouver, I think, which is about 45-60 minutes.
I don't think it was even Vancouver. I think it was an even smaller town somewhere.
And so we couldn't find it. We were just perplexed. Why isn't this movie coming out? And then finally, I guess 3 weeks later, we saw it on January 10th, maybe. So 3 weeks after, or maybe almost 4, after its proposed release date, it finally is in theaters around us. So we went and saw, is this thing on? And I'll just out of the gate say I loved it. It did not disappoint from all of the trailers, even though after a while I was like, I just want this movie to come out already because I'm tired of watching this trailer again. But I want that answer, and I don't know if I'm ever going to get it. Why? And I did on my favorite podcast, the DGA podcast, they did say that the studio did want a 2025 release, which to me means they wanted it to be considered in the Oscar run and probably all the other award shows, which unfortunately, to the best of my knowledge, it didn't really get. Not for the Globes or the Critics' Choice.
Yeah, I consider this film to be a marketing fail, not an artistic fail, for what you mentioned. So first of all, we did see the trailers, and also it was pushed on YouTube in the recommendations. No surprise to our listeners here, but Algorithm, who works for YouTube, he shows me a lot of trailers. He seems to think I like to watch movie trailers for some reason. And I saw this a lot, both in the theater and the YouTube push. It was ridiculous how much, and then it just disappeared.
Yeah.
So not only was it not available in our theaters, it disappeared from YouTube and from theaters and trailers. It was just nowhere. This to me has all the hallmarks of somebody got a visit from the Good Idea Fairy, and it was originally going to be a wide rollout on December 19th, and somebody decided they got chicken or something. I don't know. I also would say I think the trailer wasn't as successful as it could have been for 2 reasons. One, because we get to see it over and over again, I actually began to not like seeing the trailer. And it's difficult to make a trailer that people want to watch over and over again, but there are some that you don't mind more than others. This one, I was like, I'm already in. This isn't giving me any info. The other thing is I don't think it accurately captured what the film was about. I came away from the trailer thinking it would more be about him and his burgeoning stand-up career, and that's really not what it's about. It's about this relationship between the character played by Will Arnett and the character played by Laura Dern. And I'm going up on both of those characters' names right now, so oh well.
Alex was Will.
That's right, Alex was Will, not Alex. Will Arnett's character and Laura Dern's character, they are a married couple. They have twin boys.
They were Irish twins.
They have Irish twin boys. I was never clear if he was just making a joke when he said they were Irish twins or if they really were. So that, okay.
One seemed a little bit bigger than the other.
Yeah, they would absolutely have to be fraternal twins. They were not identical twins, that's for sure. For some reason, it landed as a joke to me. Anywho, so they have 2 boys who are about 10, I think they establish in dialogue, and their marriage has encountered some sort of rocky ennui of a sort. And the opening scene, you see Will sitting in a school auditorium in this performance of like the Chinese dragon from the parade with multiple people. And he's obviously just completely checked out. He's just leaning against the wall. He's not really engaged. He's disengaged, I guess is a better word. And energetically low, nothing going on. And this obviously has problems in the marriage. And the film is really about the 2 of them going through their journey, and trying not to give too many spoilers for superfan Chris and others. But I think that this film could only have been written by somebody who'd been married for 20 or more years, because I think it perfectly captured the experience of people who make their way through life, and it sounds like a cliche, but grow apart. That each person, I don't think, was intending to veer away from the other, but I use the analogy often about if you're walking through the woods, let's say, if you only ever look down at your next step, who knows where you're going to end up. You occasionally have to look up and reorient on your long-term goal. And this couple comes across to me as people who have been so focused on the next step, whatever that is, whether it be getting the kids to school or whatever job he did, that they don't notice that they've slowly steered in different direction. That description could be a film that's not good, but I think this one really is good. I felt like this was a really good film. Not that I don't want it to seem like I think Bradley Cooper's a bad director, but I think
Because you liked Star is Born.
Yeah, I did like
But
Star
then you
is Born.
didn't like Maestro.
Yeah, I didn't like Maestro as much, but I wouldn't say that is because he's not good. I just didn't care for that story quite so much. This one, yeah, I was in. I was in from the start. I like both Arnett and Dern as actors, so I was happy from that perspective, but I was immediately caught into the characters. I felt their pain. There were occasions when he held on things for an uncomfortably and awkward long period of time, which I think was a choice artistically. I didn't enjoy the awkwardness that much, but I think that was the intent, right, was to show this. I think they captured the feeling of being a burgeoning stand-up who doesn't really know what he's doing pretty well.
Yeah, I've heard other comics say this was the best depiction of what it's like to be a stand-up. And they often bring up that Punchline was the antithesis of that.
Not so good.
Yeah.
I think the choice of using the 40 millimeter lens and doing it handheld worked well in the Comedy Cellar environment to get that. The trailer, like I said, doesn't quite capture, I think, the essence of him learning to do stand-up. And that's part of the journey throughout the film, is to show him going through that. And I think the trailer does have the little bit where one of the other comics says, you're a good person. You're a bad stand-up, but you're a good person.
But I don't think the movie was about him, because it wasn't like, for example, our movie that we talked about previous, Song Sung Blue, Mike Sardino was setting out to be a performer. And Will Arnett's character, Alex, was not setting out to be a stand-up. He kind of like accidentally fell into it. This isn't a secret. It happens within the first scene. He basically is wandering and he doesn't want to pay the cover to go in and get a drink. And so the door person says, we'll put your name down. And as Will told the story, the guy saw all the names and thought, well, oh, cool. It's an inn, and there's so many names,
Correct.
I won't get up there. So he never intended, but then they called his name and he was like, oh, okay. And he didn't even try to go up and tell jokes necessarily that first time. It was, one of the other comics says, or maybe he says it, it's like therapy. Like he was just going up there and kind of telling what is happening in his life, which none of which was happy or funny, but the way he told it. And we even hear from another character later in the movie, you used to be so funny. So I think this is a person who is naturally sarcastic and naturally told stories in a entertaining, funny way, which happens to work. So he wasn't setting. He's like almost the exact opposite. And I think even as I saw him throughout the movie trying to get better, it wasn't from the standpoint like what's better for the comedy necessarily. How do I explain it? It wasn't like he was trying to be a better comic for the purposes of pursuing that as a career.
Oh,
I
right.
think he was just trying to, this is a skill someone could have, and for the betterment of the audience, I want to try to get better. And plus, I'm sure it's better to have people laugh, when you're on stage.
If that's what you're going
if that's what
for,
you're
yeah,
intending
yeah,
for, than to kind of just have this quiet, dead room. So I'm sure he was
Right.
trying to get better for those purposes, but it didn't feel like, oh, now I'm going to be a stand-up comedian. And it wasn't like he dropped his career and was pursuing that. It was like, I mean, I hesitate to use this word because it's a bad word for you, but it was almost like, oh, he accidentally discovered this hobby that he just wanted to kind of get better at.
Speaking of the previous film we reviewed on the podcast, this was a case where, yes, this was not his vocation. He wasn't intending to quit his job and become a stand-up. Now, I will mention that in the film, we had a question about what job Will Arnett's character had, because it appeared to require a suit and tie and pay pretty well, because in addition to a house in the suburbs, he was able to get a remarkably large and well-appointed apartment in the city and pay for both of them at the same time and buy a new vehicle. Now, we also mentioned this was a pretty obvious case of product placement, and not as well done as Doritos and Pepsi in Wayne's World, but Will Arnett's character gets this VW new bus thing. I don't know if it's electric or hybrid.
It is an electric.
Or something.
The most recent episode of Smartless confirmed that it was product placement, because he had to be. There was a question of what's your dream car, and Will, as an actor, had a little bit of a conflict there because he is the spokesperson for GMC.
He is.
But yet his movie right now is featuring a Volkswagen. So it was entertaining to watch him dance that line.
Now, the question would then be why the filmmakers did not approach GM first, and maybe they did, and GM declined to put a van or something in there. Mm-hmm. But I have to say it was a fun-looking car from a prop perspective, and it leads to what I consider to be such a fun moment, and the thing that really kind of seals the deal. It's a major plot point in the film after he brings this home, and he says in a very throwaway thing that I did not see coming back, like, let me get a picture of you as you see the new car. Mm-hmm. And he takes a photo of Laura Dern's character, and this should not be surprising, she was less than amused at him getting a new vehicle when they're in the process of trying to sort out their marriage. And that photo comes back in the film, and in it, Dern has just the best pissed off look on her face. It was just glorious. I loved it. And like I said, I did not see that coming. And normally I can see these kinds of things coming. He had some real life comedians that were in the film. I don't know if they were ever given names to be themselves, but they were real life stand-ups, which was, I think, a great thing for verisimilitude, but also it's fun for stand-ups to get work. And we talked about how Ms. Dern practiced quite a bit for her role to be good at volleyball. And I have famously called into question Blake Lively's running in Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. In this film, Dern was running, and I'm sure she was concerned about my review when she was training. But I do think that it comes across well. Her in-laws, his parents, played by Christine Ebersol and Karen Hines, if I remember correctly. They are absolutely fun characters because I think they hit a realistic in-between between the parents who are almost saccharine, they're so good, everything is perfect, they're just the nicest possible people and they drop everything to help you out, and then the parents who have all these eccentricities that are a pain in the butt and make life difficult for their kids. I thought they landed it right in the middle. And as a parent, I'm pretty sure that there are times when my kids are like, oh, he's the best. And then there are times when he's the worst. I think it's just part of being people and being in a family together. But I liked that. I liked how his mother was very verbal in the fact that she liked his wife and that she wasn't going to abandon his wife just because they were going through some sort of struggles. So I thought that was really good. And the dad was, I thought, played very well in that he was a fleshed out character. He didn't have a huge number of scenes, but it was the part where I believed him as a father.
Yeah, sometimes they'll portray the father like as a boob.
Yeah.
You know, just kind and they didn't do that, which that was nice. I liked it.
It's not the only example, but I often think of the Jim Belushi sitcom of how now it seems like Hollywood likes to portray the father as a complete moron, which you'd argue like Family Guy and Simpsons, but I think you'd probably go back to The Honeymooners. I don't know if Jackie Gleason's character was particularly presented in the best way, but that can be kind of annoying, and this was a case where I like that character. Now, you had mentioned in some interview, they mentioned that Bradley Cooper, who is in it as a supporting character himself, gave himself the best lines. I don't know if that's strictly true, but that
not the
character,
best lines, the funniest, like
the funniest lines,
the comic relief kind of.
That character he's kind of the buffoon, really, in the film. But the supporting characters, even that character's wife or partner, I was never clear on that relationship. And of course, we get to see Sean and Scotty. That was kind of fun.
Yes,
they were
friends.
Actually the sane people in the film, probably.
Yeah, I think so.
I was really pleasantly surprised. The only lack of enjoyment I had during this film was I was so invested in those characters. There was tension throughout that back third of the film until it was resolved. But I was really pleasantly surprised in this film.
But what I liked about it is it felt real.
Yes.
In that it wasn't, let's put these two back together because we want the happy Hollywood ending. It was, as a couple, when you invest in a marriage and then things get tough, sometimes it feels like the only way is to split up. But like, to your point, I felt like this movie showed that when you do maybe have time apart, you realize, oh no, there is a reason that I am with this person and that they feel like my person. And I think the thing that we don't allow for in our society, we've built up this dream that you meet in your 20s, or now it's probably more like 30s, and that you're going to be these same people,
right.
And what was true when you met, I'll say, is going to be the case for the next 30 to 50 years. And that's ridiculous when you say it out loud, because of course we change and morph and we grow, and God help us, we're not the same people we were in our 20s, right? We don't want to be. And so how does a marriage allow for that expansion and growth and personality change for the better or for the good? Like, you know, and so people are different people later in life than they were when you met them. And how does this union that you've created accommodate that so that both people can still feel valued and thrive and work together? And so one time I heard somebody, and this is pretty radical, but they said that they felt that marriages should have I can't remember what they called it, but like, because I know there's a vow renewal, but they didn't use that word. But basically, it's a contract, and it has a 7-year period. And every 7 years, you review it and say, do we want to continue this contract? And I would alter that slightly, because to me, that feels like it would be really easy to just go, yeah, we're not happy. Let's just sever this contract right now. I think whether it be a 7 or 10 year, just a review, because what I've noticed in my own life is when we first got together, the dreams are almost like easy because it's a path that's been navigated by many people. So it's like, we're going to get a house, we're going to have some kids, we're going to get a dog, we're going to, and you do all those things. And then 10, 20 years down the road, when those kids are grown, it's like, okay, what are our new dreams? Like, they were really easy to prescribe initially, But now what do we want to conquer, tackle, learn, grow, achieve, relax, like whatever it is, there needs to be like a second check-in or something so that you can navigate that. I used to think I wanted to do line dancing, and now I want to pursue watercolor painting, or I don't know what it is, but it just seems, and how can I help support you with that? And how does that impact you or influence you, or how do we maneuver this? And it just seems like there needs to be some sort of because right now what it feels like is we've grown, we've changed, I want different things, so I must leave you in order to go pursue those things. We've seen it in a couple friends of ours who have divorced because one kind of changes their mind about, different things. And we've said, oh, why couldn't you just articulate that and maneuver through it with that person instead of without that person?
That leads to, which I think is the best line of the film.
Sorry, no longer talking about the movie.
Where Will says, I was unhappy in our marriage, not unhappy with our marriage. Mm-hmm. One of the films we reviewed recently that I really quite liked, Eternity, is actually kind of the opposite of that, in that the premise of that is you find this person and you'll be happy together for eternity. And what I like about this film, Is This Thing On, is that it recognizes that just because you're married, you're not going to be happy forever.
Right.
And Livingston in his book talks about that's the key lesson in life, not to be happy, but how do you maintain some degree of optimism throughout all of the unhappy things that will happen. Mm-hmm. In this case, Laura Dern's character is struggling with kind of her definition of self, of what she's here to do. As a former high-level athlete, I think that's a realistic change of who am I in this world, what do I bring. There is a cameo, I'm not going to spoil it, of another former professional athlete who I think did a decent job acting, but not sure why he's acting. Again, speaking of teacup draft money, he should be fine, so it's good to see people pursuing their passions.
Yeah.
Will Arnett's character, I don't know that we felt like he was unhappy in his career, his day job, which, as we mentioned, looked to be
a profession
supporting the family. But he was also, as you mentioned, there was that great line of he used to be known as the funny guy, that he obviously had this. And so I think he too was coming back to that. And that to me was, again, kind of, even though I like both movies, the opposite of Eternity. This was a case where people were changing, they were morphing, they were struggling to find their way. Now the kids are 10. Normally, I shouldn't say normally, but often, it's when they go off to college that throws the relationship into tumult, because until then, you orbit the children, right? Anybody who's had children knows that once you have children, they are the center of your life. Everything is around them. And so they provide some sort of gravitational pull to keep people orbiting together.
It is interesting, sorry, just to jump in here, because yes, to your point, your children sometimes even dictate who your friends are, because they become, and in this case, you could tell there was history with this friend group.
Yes.
And the other one couple had a 17-year-old, so not within their kids' friends group, and the other couple appeared to be childless. So isn't that interesting that they maintained which I guess you do. You have your older friends that you knew from college maybe, and then you have your new couple friends that are around surrounding the kids. Sorry, I think in my experience, it's less common to have friends from the past still in your life unless they also have children at approximately the same age. Because I think, and I was told this before and didn't want to believe it, but when you're single and your group of singles and one of your friends couples up, they often drift away because you're doing different things. And the same as when you get married or when you have kids, because your lives do change somewhat. I liked how Bradley captured, it was a fairly short scene where she had gone back to playing the sport that she had always played and was interacting with, I wouldn't say pickup or amateur, that's maybe not considering it, but basically not a competitive league, but was still back in that. And there were some individuals and she was laughing. And so they showed her broadening her friend group. Because I think one of the things is when you are parents, often the mothers, your only friends are the people that you see at school all the time. Drop off and pick up.
And various activities like the dragon dance. And that was good to show that, as well as Will was now making some new friends at the comedy club. And they were very open and inviting. I don't know if all stand-ups are that welcoming to new people, but I wouldn't be surprised because it is such a terrifying thing to do. I think bombing on stage as a stand-up is probably one of the worst experiences
Well, for most
you can
people,
have.
famously, getting up on any stage and public speaking is the number one fear for most people.
Right. And as I've said before,
I think
understand
snakes are way
that
scarier, but
because you're faced by a bunch of apex predators who are judging you.
Mm-hmm.
That is absolutely a very good reason that's a terrifying experience.
maybe because I've done it since I was a teenager, it's not as scary for me. I mean, I still get nervous. I'll notice, like, when I do it now, my hand will kind of shake a little bit if I'm
Right.
holding notes. But yeah, snakes, I would take public speaking over snakes any day.
Well, for me, there's a number of people issue. So even if they're strangers, if it's like a dozen or less, it feels different than I would think the Comedy Cellar with a bunch of people, especially in my opinion, because you couldn't see them, you're hearing a little info. So it's not like you're performing to a camera. I remember reading that Carly Simon loved to make music in the studio, but was terrified to go on stage.
She had horrible stage
And I've
fright.
heard of other actors who are very introverted. They like the process in front of the camera, which of course, as we know, has a dozen or so crew members standing around, but it's significantly different than standing on stage at the Dorothy Chandler and accepting an award.
Yeah.
So I can kind of get that, but that showed them both kind of broadening their circle and becoming new people, unfolding.
Yes, that's a really good point. I didn't clock it when we watched it, but you're right. When she came out of that experience, she was smiling more than I think she was ever smiling in the entire movie. So yeah, she's tapping
Right.
back into the. And I had a friend who was an athlete and, like, you know, on a professional level, played internationally. And I'm almost glad I wasn't an athlete, because it just seemed like it brought with it a lot of, because you kind of peak when you're like 21, 22.
Yeah, or younger in some sports,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
and so it's so sad to think, like, this is the highest I'm going to achieve in this thing that I love so much. And to think that, and I like, it kind of plagued her through the rest of her life, because physically she saw her body changing and not to be performing at the level it was when she was younger. And I think she lost, like, a little bit of a drive, because you're probably, you know, you're seeking to not only win, but do as good as you can in each individual game. And when you lose this metric of, did we win or lose? Like, you know, how do you navigate the rest of life if you don't have an end game to
Right.
you know, to be
I
punny?
think filmmaking is great in that you can just keep getting better and better over time. Mel Brooks probably still is far funnier than even...
Or is still striving, like, I want to make the next funny movie. Like, you know.
Right. So I think a lot of these people, you're right, would struggle. And then there's the competitive aspect that some of us don't have, but I thought it came out in both dialogue and Dern's performance, where at one point he says something about competing with each other to be the better parent. And she has a line or something like, well, of course. And the way she delivered it, I believe that an athlete who competes at the topmost level is by definition insanely competitive. And again, I don't know what his character is supposed to have done, but looking at myself, I'm not that competitive. I'm kind of on the other end of that spectrum. So I thought it was good that we showed that that was one aspect of their relationship, but as well, it was a fully formed character. You mentioned that when she came out, she had a smile, but she also had a lightness in step, and I think Dern did a great job throughout much of the film of having a weightiness to her body, the way she moved through the world. You really communicated that she was carrying what she felt was the weight of the entire family on her shoulders. And I think, as is very common with those things, I think his character did as well. Both people thought they were pulling 100%, which is obviously not true, but that speaks to their perception. And I think they were both kind of stuck. And so for each of them, they had a different thing that allowed them to unstick and begin to continue that mutation of life, because we all change all the way up until we die. We're continually changing to varying degrees. And to me, that was one of the themes of the film, was it's hard, but they could do it together.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier a lot of people, well, maybe not, I shouldn't say a lot, a good number we've heard of divorces happen when the kids go off to college, because I think parents are trying to stay together until then. I wonder if another common age is about 10 years old, because you get them through like kind of the most needy years. And when they're 10, you can say, go take a shower. You know, they can dress themselves. They could even make simple meals for themselves. So I do wonder, is that another, if not common time for divorces, is it a common time for parents to kind of sit back and kind of sigh and kind of catch their breath, because you've been on a marathon from 0 to 10 and now you're finally reaching this place where I guess in a way we can start to individuate from them, you know?
Yes, exactly.
Because when they're 3, you still, like, you can't leave the room almost still. There are dangers within a room sometimes.
In my 4-quarter model of life, that second quarter, 25 to 50, let's say, is all about raising the children and releasing them into the world. And certainly there are different milestones along the way. But then once they're out in the world, whether it be going off to college, I think more a little bit after that, they go off into their career and maybe find a partner. What is it that you're here to do? And that second quarter, you're really consumed with the children. That is what you're here to do. It gives you purpose, it gives you a direction and a goal. And we saw these two people who are kind of stuck in that role, and they were miserable for good reasons. And it took this to knock them out of it. And having recently, 13 months ago, gone through an involuntary life change, I understand what that's like, that you need to sometimes be kicked out of or knocked out of your stasis, whatever rut you're stuck in. So that really resonated with me, even though I haven't done stand-up comedy and I don't think that's really my path. I could kind of, I think, really resonate with that character in the sense that now something outside of my control has completely upended my life. What do you do next? You pivot, to call back to Friends. How do you change and adapt? And to me, that was the ultimately extremely optimistic message of this film. I was a little concerned midway through that this was going to be a downer of a film with an ultimately pessimistic, negative message. And it actually is the opposite. I think it's a very positive message. I am so excited about this. I really, really enjoyed this. I will watch this film again. In there is great stunt work by Bradley Cooper, where he has a pratfall, and it introduces his character in a way where you're like, this guy is a complete boob. But then you mentioned in interviews, he talked about a later scene, there are some food items that he wanted to get through the scene to eat them.
To consume.
And I'm just gonna go ahead and share this one to everybody, not just Bradley. This is a trade secret. Order twice as many because you didn't get to eat them before the scene as well. Just have the guys get twice as many. I thought that was a great excuse to have food, right? So I got to think of that in my own films. What food do I want to eat? I need to write them in so that I can get them on set for me. But I thought his character was, like it was in the trailer, he is just kind of such a weird, I don't want to be insulting, but kind of the worst of every stereotype of artistic, bohemian kind of character. It was almost, it was some of the funniest lines because that character was so absurd in the film.
Well, and it's smart, I guess, if you're going to be the director and an actor, why give yourself the heaviest, like, monologues?
Yeah, the emotional lifting. Just come in and be a wisecracker.
Yeah.
Credit must be given to those two young actors who played the sons, because I felt their performance, in particular where they are upset about things that are happening in their family, was really well done.
Well, and they weren't like the precocious,
right,
like,
exactly,
given the best lines, the lines that you kind of go, would any kids say that? I mean, although these kids, but I do think kids are more savvy now. I do think, divorce is probably way more common than it even was like when we were kids and stuff. So kids are aware
Right.
of stuff. And so they probably are smarter. And I wonder, have parents learned? Because, I mean, my parents did not deliver divorce news well.
Famously so.
But parents, I think, are more educated. They kind of, you would at least Google how to tell your kids that you're divorcing. And so they would maybe have access to better advice.
Right.
So, but yeah, I agree. These kids' acting, it was great. It was like right on. It was cute. There were light moments. They were funny without being either saccharinely sweet or like just too cute that it wasn't believable. Right. It was very believable.
Credit to the actors as well as to Cooper for the direction, because I thought, they came across as real characters, but not ridiculously precocious and above it. So I want to say that all of the acting performances were outstanding. You had talked a little bit about how he had, in I think of the DGA interview, talked about using a 40 millimeter lens. Bradley Cooper is credited as a B camera op. We know that he did
90%, he said, of some of the camera work.
That he wasn't in the scene, of course.
Right.
And while I generally don't enjoy the handheld as much, as I said, I think his choice of lens and stability worked really well with the film. There were a combination of the look of that comedy cellar versus the look of their house, right? So there was a bit of a change in the visual palette. Well done. The set decorating, I really want to call out that I thought his apartment was such a nice departure that often, if it's an apartment in New York City, we either see the gigantic, gorgeous loft that would be millions of dollars, or it's this tiny, crappy, rodents and water dropping from the ceiling and stuff. And to me, it looked like a guy who had money, but who is a bachelor. They really landed it perfectly.
Yeah, I agree. Because he doesn't really want to invest. In fact, I did wonder, it's funny. I was looking at his apartment, I was like, I wonder, did he get a furnished apartment? Because... and then there's a line where he did pull some of their furniture out of storage. And because you wouldn't want to invest, because ultimately you don't want this to be your fight. You want to go back, I would think, and his character seemed, he wanted to go back ultimately. I don't think he wanted, so it wasn't like, especially, I'm sorry, I'm going to be stereotypical, a dude probably is just like, as long as it's got a bed and a roof and running water, I'm fine. Like, so they're not going to get super involved in let me decorate it. Like maybe a female would, just because that's maybe how you would channel your frustration, anger, hurt, whatever. And so it was very believable that that's what his apartment would look like. And the fact that it wasn't dirty, but it wasn't tidy either. Like when he came home, things landed where he dropped them, and then he wouldn't pick them up until he needed them again, kind of like it was the look. It wasn't a hoarder, or there wasn't like newspapers piling, but coats were on couches.
And I thought this was great storytelling, because that showed us that he wasn't
living there.
He wasn't living there. That wasn't
there.
A new home.
Right.
It was a temporary spot for him, kind of like an extended stay. And when you talk about the number of rooms and the number of shots involved, which are relatively few, great work on that department for communicating that. And this is where I feel like some of the jobs in filmmaking are, if done well, nobody notices them. They're the invisible heroes, because that's the kind of thing where if you had screwed that up, people would have noticed and it would have taken them out of the film. And by doing their job well, it supported the narrative in a way that was seamless. And there's a lot of craftspeople involved in every film that do work like that, where you just don't notice it. I noticed, as an example, the makeup department. We've seen in other shows Laura Dern have less or more makeup, because she is of an age where you can do that. You can vary her look quite a bit. And this was a case where I felt like her character looked like an appropriately aged woman who was a housewife, but also was cinematically good looking for, probably in real life, people who are soccer moms don't have that kind of makeup on, but it was done in a realistic way where I felt like that worked. And then he looked just positively drained. It reminded me, especially that first scene, of Tom Hanks in Joe versus the Volcano, right? the brain fog. And they were able to communicate that fatigue as well, while still making sure that, because he's a handsome guy, he still looks handsome. And that's what I find is great about professionals at this makeup, is that they can communicate these things without a person looking as truly miserable as they might be in real life.
Yeah, and to your point, I just realized early in the film, he's wearing a lot of black t-shirts and dark colored t-shirts, and his suits are dark. And then near the end, when he's getting better, like that final time that he goes on stage, he's wearing a white t-shirt. So it's that, you know. And
if I recall correctly, Laura is in a lot of white, which maybe that, you know, is to indicate the bride. Right? Well done. And then, of course, they had a ton of fun with all of Bradley's outfits, which were just kind of all over the map. So I really have lots of good things to say about this. We've talked about before that poor old Bradley's digging himself out of the hole of Wedding Crashers.
I know. I was scared for him.
Yeah. But he's doing some fantastic work.
Bravo.
As a director.
Everyone involved. Laura did an amazing job.
Yeah.
Will, I mean, I was so looking forward to this movie, and I'm mad that I had to wait 3 extra weeks, but I guess I could say it was worth the wait. But I'm more mad at the studio than the creatives involved.
My concern is that in the world that we live in, with marketing such a big deal, that decision that this will be an undiscovered gem, that it's going to fall through the cracks for people, when I really think this is actually a really good film. I like this much better than Marty Supreme, which got a lot more awards buzz. So that's my only concern, is that it won't get the attention that it would deserve because of kind of how they put it out and when they put it out. Any last thoughts on, is this thing on?
Yeah, no, it's in the theaters now, so catch it.
People can run out and get it. And never forget, Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.
Thanks for listening to Dodge Movie Podcast with Christy and Mike Dodge of Dodge Media Productions. To find out more about this podcast and what we do, go to dodgemediaproductions.com. Subscribe, share, leave a comment, and tell us what we should watch next. Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.